Instead of prioritizing this, we have pedestalized that. We call this a pick-me and we call that a girl boss. And this has become the trendy, the normalized. This has become the quote-unquote cultural norm. This right here. That's the biggest problem within our community. The fact that this woman, who is a wife and a mother, is seen as problematic. As a matter of fact, this morning, I put out a TikTok speaking on this exact subject. And let me read out this message from a young lady. This was one of the first comments within like the first 20 minutes of this post being out. She said, I wanted to be a wife my whole life, and I was shamed every step of the way. Now I don't give a about girl bossing and being hot. I want to be a family woman. This is a young black woman who said that. So there's a lot of y'all who getting offended, who are still going with the program. Go ahead and enjoy whatever is left on that Democratic plantation for you. But as of right now, let's get into this video right here. So I'm starting to like do this little thing where I use my phone a little more. Just because I have it, why would I not integrate it into these videos and make my life easier? So we're going to get into a video. And I'm going to give my little 2 cents as we break it down.
Yes, there is an app that allows you to see a map of registered sex offenders in your area, and that's called the Newsbreak.
Why y'all show me that, though? Okay, let's.
The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had...
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany.
It's not being black, it's a way of life. Unfortunately, the way of life is being celebrated.
The
Whoa. Go back. We're trying to read that quote, brother. We're trying to read that quote. I know the education system has failed a lot of us, so let me go ahead and read this for some of y'all who might be partially illiterate. Let me go ahead. It's not being black. It's not being black. It's a way of life. So he's speaking of what the actual overarching issue is in the black community. Unfortunately, the way of life is being celebrated not only in rap music, but among the intellectia. Ooh, that's a word right there. Or intelligentsia. I say intellectia. Look at me. Dyslexia is what kicked in right there. But among the intelligentsia is a way of life that leads to a lot of very big problems for most people. The thing I love about Thomas Sowell is he is genuinely one of the most brilliant minds, even well into his old age. Yet, he says things simply. And that's how you know somebody truly understands the subject. If they can break something down colloquially, as opposed to having to be so abstract, they actually understand the issue. So let's get into it.
I mean, the average of black kid today, I think, is probably better off, certainly materially, than, say, Ben Carson was when he was growing up.
Ben Carson, the famous
black
surgeon at Johns Hopkins.
Right.
Who is immensely accomplished in every way.
Yes.
Right.
I would say that certainly the black kids who are growing up today have a higher material standard of living than I had. The difference was that the schools were good when I came along. They were especially good in New York at that time, hard as that is to believe. But the kids who grew up in that same place where I lived, they will not get that same education. Now that can be blamed on somebody, but it has very little to do with what happened 100 or 200 years ago. And it's true in other countries. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, there's a tribe, the Igbos, who are living in one of the least fertile parts of Nigeria, who were in fact enslaved in centuries past by other tribes and so on. When the British moved in and set up schools, the Igbos went for the schools. By the time Nigeria became independent, the Igbos had climbed above the other groups that had been ahead of them to begin with. So, but there are all kinds of cross currents of factors. The particular culture, or the particular geography, you run through the whole list of them.
You cite, in Intellectuals and Race, you cite an observation by the intelligence expert, IQ scientist, James Flynn, that just stopped me cold. After the Second World War, you've got large numbers of American troops remaining in Germany. For that matter, there's still several tens of thousands there today. And both black and white American soldiers had children with German women. And Flynn discovered that those children growing up in Germany showed no IQ differences at all. The black kids and
Yeah, this entire argument of it's been an IQ, it's an IQ problem. No, it is a value system problem. Again, he's going to get obviously deeper into this. If in your household you are not incentivized to master mathematics, but instead you are left to reign free and essentially get into a sport or whatever it is, and you give your time and attention to that, and that becomes the cultural norm, then you're going to be disproportionately better at the sport than you are at math. That's how that works. And so even things such as the SAT score, things such as the IQ test have become quote unquote racist, according to the far left propagandists, because they see a discrepancy. It's like anything that has a discrepancy must be racism, sexism, homophobia, etc. They can't explain it in any other way. They simplify the world down to these most superficial aspects. Oh, the wage gap, that's sexism and misogyny. No, it's the fact that you guys aren't getting into the actual data, which will show you that if you did hour per hour, if you did within the very same industry, in the very same position, you're going to see the exact same pay. Once you start getting a group of data points together, randomized, and you're not counting for these other aspects of what are these two people prioritizing. Women become mothers. Women have less hours that they probably work because, of their families, etc. When you start to factor those things in, even within the same industry, let's say, you will start to see a very different story. So there are disingenuous ways that the propaganda machine kind of emotionalizes people with this information. Well, you see the discrepancy. You see black people down here, white people up here, racism. There's no other way to explain it. That emotionalizes you. You continue to perpetuate your very same victim narrative. Your powerlessness is what it really is, right? I know I use the buzzword victim or victimhood, etc., but it's really a belief in a lack of personal agency, a belief that you do not have any power over your own life, which is the number one indicator of like depression, self-deletion, and things of that nature, or even violence towards others, is the belief that you have no personal agency.
And the white kids, the same. Quoting intellectuals and race, Professor Flynn concluded that the reason was that the offspring of black soldiers in Germany, and now you're quoting Professor Flynn, grew up in a nation with no black subculture.
Yeah.
Close quote. Which means what? Which means they experienced exactly the same expectations. Is this
No. The expectations are external. The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had.
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany.
So here's what I'm getting. There is something about black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes. In fact, I went into this in a previous book on which about black rednecks and white liberals, because that same subculture.
Let's talk about two of your books here. Go ahead.
Because that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. That in the time this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both.
All right. And so whose job is it to say, wrong subculture, folks, you're harming yourselves?
Well, I would think in an ideal world that intellectuals might take on that task, but the world that we live in, I've noticed, is not ideal.
All right. What is to be done?
I believe the quote-unquote intellectuals have become so hung up in that ideology, right? They're looking to be a part of that fold, to virtue signal, etc. I saw a statistic recently. It said for every one conservative professor, there is around 140 liberal professors. Yeah. Out of a room of 100 of these individuals, there will be 0.75 conservatives in that room. Insanity. And they love to talk about the echo chamber. They are the quintessential epitome of an echo chamber in these universities.
Take a look at President Lyndon Johnson speaking at Howard University in 1965.
Oh, yes.
But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want and do as you desire and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair.
It's pathetic. It's not a question of, there's no you who has the control to be completely fair or completely unfair.
Yeah, I'm gonna let that commercial go.
I mean, the circumstances are. So someone once criticized the mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair, and I think it was David Reisman who said the tests are not unfair. Life is unfair, and the tests are measuring the results. But who has control of life?
Mind you, I didn't know if he was going to get into the LBJ situation. So LBJ, the man who's given that speech, was the president who stepped into office after JFK's assassination, the man who was forced into signing the Civil Rights Act. And I say forced because the bill had already passed through the House and the Senate with the majority Republican House and Senate, right? I've done a multitude of videos now on the history of the Republican Party, so you can go ahead and do that and get yourself, caught up on some of these things. But as far as LBJ was a well-known racist. He was at the beginning of his life, and he ended his life the same way. But he was also a wise serpent. He was a smart snake, that guy. He understood that since black folk are going to be integrated, we might as well pander to them. We might as well have them believe that we're the ones to vote for. As a matter of fact, he was quoted as saying, we're going to have these voting Democrat for the next 60 years. As he was signing the paperwork. So looks like his prophecy came true, because we're in 2024 and finally there is some semblance of a shift that is happening. Again, a swing, a movement to the right. So LBJ was one of the masterminds of what we now see with the this diehard devotion within especially the black population. And I say sometimes so-called community and quote unquote community, because what is the community really, right? When you think about white people, they don't necessarily say the white community. They might say the German community, or the who else would they have? The Italian community, things of that nature, sub-communities. But we're the only ones who seem to see each other as some type of monolith. We're just this one group. Even within Hispanic folks, they might have their environments, but there's still those who are seen as the third and fourth generation who see themselves as much different than those who just got here, and they even have their own different names and stuff like that. So anyway, black folk mostly have voted as just one unit, and unfortunately it's been to our detriment time and time again, because we've fallen into the agenda of these Democrats or these Democrats. So let's get back.
Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
So Lyndon Johnson, in fact, although good liberal that he was, at least in regard, Lyndon Johnson had a complicated career and changed positions on issues many times. But good liberal though he was at that moment, he was in fact engaging in a breathtaking arrogance.
Yes.
On two counts. One, that white people were the ones who were responsible for where black people stood in the race, that it was up to whites entirely. That blacks, as he described, I'm putting this to you, black people are passive, they're acted upon.
That's right. And
then the second act of arrogance is the supposition that somehow the federal government could fix it.
Yes, it is staggering. But if you wanted to be charitable, you could say, well, he said this in 1965. But if you say, all right, why are people now repeating it in 2013 when we've had nearly half a century of experience to the contrary? And if you look within the black community, those blacks who had escaped what I call the black redneck culture, they've moved on. So, but it's the culture the different parts of the black community had. They were different.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, in his famous 1965 report entitled "The Negro Family: The Case for National Action," close quote. Longish quotation, but it gets to something, I believe. Moynihan, the fundamental problem is that of family structure. The Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. A middle class has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled and poorly educated, the fabric of conventional social relationships has all but disintegrated. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. Close quote. When Moynihan wrote those words, the illegitimacy rate among African Americans was 25%. Today, the illegitimacy rate among white Americans is 36%. Among Hispanics, more than 50%, and among African Americans, more than 70%.
Yes.
Aside from throwing up your hands in despair, what is to be done?
The first thing to be done is to understand that this was a result of policies begun in the 1960s. This is not a legacy of what happened 100 years before the 1960s.
The breakdown of the black family is not a legacy of slavery.
No. If you the classic study of this goes all the way back to the era of slavery, and they find that most black kids, even under slavery, had lived with two parents, and that was true all the way up until the 1960s. And so, if you really want to find out what has happened, what's changed, it has changed since the 1960s. And the fact that whites now have a higher rate of illegitimacy than blacks had when Moynihan wrote suggests that this is something that spreads out. But if you look at something else, if you look at those blacks, and look at black husband-wife families, the poverty rate among such families has been in single digits every year since 1994. And so if you look at the external causes, why the husband and wife families and the welfare single mom families all are facing the same society and objective things, but the results are radically different because the cultures and values are different.
So you would roll back welfare. I guess that's the principal policy. So what would Tom Sowell do? One, you'd eliminate welfare, you'd reform welfare. What would you do?
Roll it back.
All right. And what about affirmative action?
I'll let y'all finish the video for yourselves. I'll put the link in the description below, but I did want to just touch on that for a second. The welfare system has become a generational curse, in essence. It was supposed to be, and is supposed to be, something that individuals use for a period of time, right? When it is necessary. But instead, we have seen multi-generational, like Section 8 housing, where the children and the children's children and the children's children are raised in Section 8 housing, as opposed to there being an incentive. Because there is no incentive. If you grow up in such an environment and you're told that this is the norm and that this is what you should aspire for and that this is who we are and all we can ever be, and then you have these external messages coming in to say, yeah, just the racist system is on your head and you can't make anything of yourself. You're only going to have one out of every 100, if that, who are going to make it out of that environment. And those end up being the very same people who come out of that and leave those environments and make something else of themselves, who take themselves off of welfare, who don't continue to essentially milk the system past the necessary and need point, right? You might have a part of your life, a section of your life where you need them food stamps, you need whatever it is just to get yourself by. Maybe you got the kids, whatever it is, right? You got to make things happen. But those who are Those who aren't stuck in this loop, in this victim narrative, are going to look to empower themselves, to uplift themselves from that situation. You know, it's amazing how these sayings like lift yourself up by the bootstraps all of a sudden became a racist terminology, when in truth it's just saying you have the ability to do something about your situation. And anybody who tells you otherwise doesn't actually love you. They don't actually care about you. They're looking to control you or get something up out of you. Usually money if it's a race hustler, and a vote if it's a Democrat. Simple as that. So appreciate y'all for tuning in. Till the next time.
I used to be afraid of the dark, a place unknown like a hardening heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 365, that's a